All right, strap yourselves in, folks, because today we're diving deep into a case a lot of you have been asking about. The story of Peter Manuel.
Scotland's first known serial killer.
And let me tell you, this one is a wild ride.
What's so fascinating about Manuel's story, and the reason we're taking this deep dive, is to look at the impact his crimes had on Scotland as a whole.
We're talking about a period between 1956 and 1958, a time when people were genuinely afraid to walk the streets.
Exactly. It wasn't just about catching a killer.
It was about understanding how this one man changed the way people lived their lives, how the police did their jobs.
Even how the legal system worked.
To piece it all together, we've got some amazing sources to work with.
We've got articles, first-hand accounts, and some incredible historical records.
From the Glasgow Police Museum.
So really it's like stepping back in time.
Getting a feel for the atmosphere, the fear that gripped the nation.
Chilling stuff.
Now, our guy Peter Manuel, he starts his life pretty ordinarily.
Born in New York City in 1927 to Scottish parents.
You know, they actually tried settling in Detroit for a while.
Really?
Yeah, but poverty forced them back to Scotland.
And then to Coventry in 1937.
So a lot of moving around
Right.
makes you wonder if that instability played a role.
In his later, well, everything.
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely couldn't have been easy for a young kid.
No, not at all.
Especially when you consider that his criminal tendencies emerged pretty early on.
How early are we talking?
The Glasgow Police Museum records actually mention his first offense at age 10.
10.
10 years old.
Wow.
Stealing from a chapel's collection box.
Almost like a foreshadowing
Right.
of the audacity he'd later display.
And by 15, his crimes took a much darker turn.
Much darker.
Yeah, he was actually imprisoned for attacking a woman.
During a burglary, hitting her with a hammer while she slept.
It's a pretty significant escalation.
Huge.
Sounds like a troubled childhood spiraling into something truly sinister.
And that was just the beginning.
This incident really set the stage for a life in and out of prison.
Burglaries, rape, assault. Manuel became a well-known figure.
To the police.
Yes.
And here's a detail that always gets me.
What's that?
Manuel started representing himself in court.
No way.
And get this, the judges were impressed by his legal skills.
Oh, kidding.
It's like he was practicing honing his abilities.
For something bigger, something darker.
Exactly.
So we've got this picture of a troubled kid turned career criminal.
Right.
But when does he make that leap to becoming Scotland's first recognized serial killer?
Well, the first murder officially linked to Manuel happened in January 1956.
Tell me about it.
The victim was 17-year-old Anne Nealons,
Young woman.
and her body was found brutally murdered on a golf course in East Kilbride.
Tragic.
Absolutely tragic.
And wasn't this one of the cases where they actually suspected him early on?
You're thinking about Detective Muncie?
Yes.
He had a history with Manuel, had arrested him before. Muncie pointed him out as a suspect right away, even noted the scratches on his face.
From a struggle, perhaps, but they couldn't prove anything right.
Not at that time, no.
Frustrating,
It is to think they had their guy.
but couldn't make it stick.
Manuel's father actually provided an alibi, so the police had no choice but to let him go.
Oh, wow. The father covered for him.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So Manuel walks free.
And the terror begins.
And the people of Scotland, they're living in fear reading these headlines.
East of Birkinshaw, still at large.
Right. Can you imagine?
It's like something out of a nightmare.
People were terrified to leave their homes.
Women especially.
They wouldn't go out alone, wouldn't walk down the street after dark.
And all this time,
Manuel's out there.
living his life.
Not exactly living a normal life, though.
What do you mean?
He continued burglarizing homes.
Right.
But there was something off about the way he did it. He wouldn't just take things,
You leave food out, make a mess.
make the beds, but then leave muddy footprints on the sheets.
Almost like he wanted to be noticed.
A signature.
A calling card.
Yeah, like he was taunting the police.
So they knew it was him,
At least they suspected it was him.
but they couldn't prove it.
Not yet.
And then, in December 1957, another young woman disappears.
Isabel Cook
She was just 17 years old.
vanished on her way to a dance.
They found some of her belongings.
Near the River Calder.
But her body...
Was never recovered.
I bet Detective Muncie was starting to see a pattern here.
Oh, absolutely.
With Manuel's history of violence against women.
He knew Manuel was involved somehow.
But still, no concrete evidence.
It's like trying to catch a ghost.
And then comes New Year's Day, 1958.
The Smart family murders.
This one was particularly brutal.
The whole family, Peter Smart, his wife Doris, their 10-year-old son Michael,
all shot dead in their home.
in Uddingston.
And the most chilling part,
Manuel stayed in the house with the bodies.
for days,
Almost a week.
eating their food, taking care of their cat.
Can you imagine
It's almost beyond comprehension.
the level of depravity?
And the audacity.
He even gave a lift to a policeman who was investigating Isabel Cook's disappearance.
While driving the Smart's stolen car?
It's like he wanted to get caught.
Or maybe he just felt invincible.
Maybe both.
But eventually, everyone makes a mistake.
And Manuel's mistakes.
To something so simple.
Banknotes.
Banknotes.
Yeah, Peter Smart had withdrawn some new 5-pound notes just before he was killed.
Planning to use them for a family vacation.
And Manuel started using those exact notes
No.
in pubs around Glasgow.
So careless.
A bartender recognized the notes.
And reported it to the police.
They traced the notes back to Peter Smart
And the net closed in.
on January 11, 1958,
They finally had their man.
arrested at his parents' house.
The relief must have been overwhelming.
For the people of Scotland, yes.
But the story doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
Because during the arrest
They found stolen goods.
at the parents' house.
Manuel's father was taken into custody.
And that's when things took an unexpected turn.
Manuel made a deal.
To protect his father.
He confessed
To
his
everything. Ann Nealon's, the Watts, Isabel Cook, the Smarts.
all of them.
He confessed to protect his father.
Strange kind of loyalty, isn't it?
Twisted, but loyalty nonetheless.
He even led the police to Isabel Cook's body,
Killing.
uttering the words, "I think I'm standing on her now."
No remorse.
None at all.
And that lack of remorse continued through his trial.
Which began in May 1958.
Remember how he used to represent himself in court?
Yeah.
Well, he decided to do it again.
For his murder trial.
He dismissed his lawyers
Wow.
and defended himself.
Incredible.
The judge even commented on his skill.
He was that good.
Apparently so.
Unbelievable.
But no amount of legal maneuvering could save him.
He was found guilty
Of 7 of the 8 murders.
and sentenced to death.
What about the 8th murder?
Ann Nealon's.
Right.
The judge directed the jury to acquit him on that charge.
Not enough evidence.
It's like even in death, he managed to evade full accountability.
And what about the taxi driver in Newcastle?
Sidney Dunn.
Right.
He wasn't officially tried for that murder because it happened in England.
Different jurisdiction.
But a coroner's jury later attributed Dunn's death to Manuel,
So officially, 7 murders.
but likely responsible for at least 8.
Maybe even more.
A terrifying thought.
It is. It really is.
And his case changed Scotland.
Forever.
It forced them to look at their justice system, at the very nature of evil. Even with his capture, even with his execution, there were still so many questions surrounding Peter Manuel.
Like, what could drive a person to commit such horrific acts?
Right? What makes a monster? It's the question that never goes away.
It's fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
And the sources we've looked at, they offer some explanations, but there's no easy answer.
No simple explanation.
Some people point to his childhood, the bullying.
The constant moving, never really having a stable home life.
It's definitely a factor.
Like that old saying, hurt people hurt people.
Right, but does that explain everything?
The level of premeditation in his crimes.
The cold, calculated violence.
It's hard to reconcile.
Some experts believe his time in prison played a role.
Hardened him,
Made him resentful of authority.
especially towards Detective Muncie.
Their relationship is fascinating, isn't it?
Almost like a game of cat and mouse.
Sending those birthday cards.
Like he wanted to keep Muncie close, torment him.
Psychological warfare.
And it seems like it worked.
To a certain extent, yes.
Muncie was so dedicated to catching Manuel.
But some say he became obsessed.
Consumed by the case.
There was even talk of Manuelitis,
Suggesting that Muncie saw Manuel's hand in every crime.
even when there was no connection.
Wow, that's intense.
It really highlights the psychological toll this case took on everyone involved.
Not just the victims and their families.
But the investigators, the community as a whole,
It's like Manuel's shadow loomed over everything.
even after his death.
And speaking of impact, his crimes really forced Scotland to take a hard look at its justice system.
The Glasgow Police Museum materials were pretty clear about that.
The push for a national police force.
It makes sense.
All those jurisdictional issues, the lack of communication between different forces.
It allowed Manuel to slip through the cracks.
To operate with impunity.
It became clear that something had to change.
A more unified approach.
And eventually, that change did come.
Scotland established a single national police force.
In 2013.
Decades later, but still.
It's a direct result of Manuel's crimes.
A chilling reminder of what he did.
But also a sign of progress.
A way to honor the victims by making sure something like this never happens again.
Exactly. Learning from the past to build a better future.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, folks.
A lot of dark ground.
But this is just the beginning, you know?
There's so much more to explore.
Court transcripts, psychological profiles. There's even a recent TV drama based on Manuel's story.
It's a complex case, a fascinating case.
And a disturbing one.
For sure.
But as you continue your own deep dive into this case, we want you to keep one thing in mind.
What's that?
Peter Manuel, he wasn't some monster hiding in the shadows.
He was a man.
A man who walked among us, who blended in.
While harboring this darkness inside.
Could it have been prevented?
Were there signs, missed opportunities?
These are questions we may never have the answers to.
But they're worth asking.
They're worth thinking about.
As we try to understand the complexities of human nature.
The capacity for both good and evil.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and stay curious.
Stay safe out there, folks.